Alright, and welcome back to the Pedigo Zoo. I'm gonna do reading for non-readers. I think it's part 3 today. The title will tell you for sure, but I'm gonna be covering some dyslexia stuff. I have dyslexia. I believe I was diagnosed in like 2nd grade, maybe 3rd. I can't quite remember. It's been a while since I've made a video, so some things have changed. I got glasses, so apparently I've needed glasses, so that helps my reading a little bit. I finished my last book. Buddy, you're supposed to be laying down. It's night-night time. I put the puppies up for bed, but as you can see, I'm still awake. I don't know if they're happy about that or not, but it's whatever. Been good boys today. 3 of them are asleep. But anyway, getting back onto topic, I've been dyslexic. Well, I guess I've been dyslexic my whole life, but I've known about it since I was in 2nd grade. And school really sucked because of that. It was not fun. I struggled constantly. Gonna be honest with you, I couldn't barely read when I got out of high school. I could read signs. I was fluent, but when I sat down to read a book, I could not get through a page. It was to the point where I struggled very hard, but it was because of how hard I struggled. I became determined to learn how to read because it pissed me off that I couldn't do it. And I see like 5th graders finishing a book in 2 weeks when it takes me a couple years. So I've been determined on getting better. Now it only takes me a month or 2 to finish a book. I just finished Wizard and Glass, like I said. I think I said that. I just finished Wizard and Glass. I'm starting Stephen King's Salem's Lot on my extended read of the Dark Tower series. It's very good. I'm about maybe halfway through it. Maybe not quite halfway through it. But yeah, I've thought tonight I'd talk about some dyslexic issues that I've had and how I've looked at it. I did a little research on how the brain works and the current views on dyslexia. But I just wanted to kind of, as a dyslexic person, if you're out there struggling with this, it's hard. It sucks. Nothing seems like it helps fast enough. There's no quick way around it. If you're struggling in school, there's no way but through, and I'm sorry to say that now, but there are ways to help. There's no way that's going to make it easier. It's a struggle, but it's one you have to endure through. And I know you can because god damn it, I was in the special ed classes, and I saw people give up in those classes because like it's kind of, when they put you in a special ed class, it's like, okay, well, you're not good enough to hang with most of the students, so we're going to put you in the special class and see if you can cut it there. And yeah, that's not supposed to feel like that, but you always got it in the back of your head like, okay, well, I can't hang with the normal kids, so why am I even trying? And frankly, it's not the way to look at it, but it's how you do. I know it because it sucks. But as an adult, I've looked at it and I realized that I did myself a disservice during that time. I didn't try. I didn't care. And that was a struggle because how could I care if everything I was doing was not yielding any success? I wasn't getting anywhere. So I tried and tried and tried, and I didn't get anywhere, so I just stopped trying. Because you can only punch a brick wall so many times before you realize you're not tearing that brick wall down with your fists. And that's where I really felt frustrated. But as an adult, I determined that I need to work on my reading because it's something that bothers me, that I couldn't read. Or I couldn't read proficiently. And that bothered me. So, as humiliating as it's been, on some occasions, I needed to do it. Because for me, knowing that wasn't my strength, knowing that I struggled with it, that was all the more reason to get better at it for me. I remember hearing somewhere Arnold Schwarzenegger said, if you told him you can't do it, you can't be an actor, that's all he wanted to do was be an actor. In a sense, I have that same feeling about reading. I've told myself I can't do it long enough. I'm sick of telling myself I can't do it. I'm sick of thinking, oh, well, I'll just wait for the movie to come out because I can't fully read that book. I got sick of that. So, I've started learning. It's a struggle, but I'm hoping to share what I've learned. Some of the research I did was, well, let's give credit where credit is due. I watched a Vox video, and I know they're not. I know Vox is a good source, but sometimes they get it twisted. I'm mixing this with my own. I'm mixing this with my own anecdotal things as a dyslexic person, but the video was Vox, Why the Dyslexic Brain is Misunderstood. It was a pretty interesting video. In fact, if I can figure out how to link stuff, I'll link it below. But the video just kind of explained a lot of the kind of really simply explained the brain mechanics, and I'm not going to go into that because I'm not going to understand like or neural passageways and hemispheres of the brain, but essentially it's saying when normal people read, parts of their brain are firing that don't fire in ours, and because they don't fire in ours is compensating with other parts of the brain, which just makes the reading more laborious or harder to do. And I would say that checks out from my experience. So, understand it is a brain makeup thing, and I guess it's hereditary, although neither of my parents had it, and I'm not aware of any of my grandparents having it either, or any relative for that matter. In fact, I'm about the only one in my family that has struggled in school that I'm aware of. I mean, there may be a cousin or two, but I'm not certain. And I think they're doing just fine. I've never heard of them struggling as bad as I did. But that's probably because my family is very well educated and they're very they have the abilities that I struggled with naturally. My sister's very smart. My mother was I believe she was an adjunct professor. I'm not certain. My father whiz with computers, very smart. I didn't get that. I got the mechanical brain. I can tear apart an engine, and just from seeing the engine come apart, I know how it works. That's something that not everyone's blessed with. I've noticed that at work. When you got a bolt that's okay, so this is the bolt. This is going to be the head of the bolt, the hex nut. So when it is, and this is going to be the threaded portion. So when you have a bolt that's up and under something, with the hex nut facing away from you, some people just naturally reach in there and can unscrew it without thinking, and other people will be like, okay, lefty loosey, but like lefty loose, and it takes them a second. For me, it's not been that hard to figure out. As soon as I grab that bolt, I know which way to turn it because I have that picture, that I have that like model of the thing I'm working on in my mind, and I guess not everyone can project that model, even though sometimes when I project that model in my mind it's wrong, and later I realize, okay, so that's not like this, it's like this, so I can change it. It's kind of like having a really shitty CAD system in your head, and it works great for me. I would say I'm very successful in what I do as a welder fabricator. I'd say it's a struggle some days, but it's come pretty easily over the last handful of years. I've been blessed that I'm very mechanically minded, and I do think that has something to do with my dyslexia. So where we struggle with reading, numbers, math, grammar, my grammar's awful, spelling, I can't spell worth a shit. I've tried teaching myself. It's something I want to work on, but it is not right now. Not while I'm trying to learn to read and shit. One struggle at a time. So just know that if you're struggling with dyslexia, You might not be struggling in other places that people struggle. So just, if that makes you feel better, it made me feel better when I figured that out. When I was in a welding, I was in a, it wasn't a welding course. Like I wasn't learning anything, but it was like Caterpillar had this like week long weld test where they get new welders, and because they would hire inexperienced people who had never welded before, they tested them for an entire week. And if you've welded before, you went in with them, and they'd move you out as you passed the tests. Because I think there were a handful of tests. I don't remember what they were, but it was like a week long welding course, sort of. But you were passing. It was like a week long weld test, is what I'd call it. And I noticed that some people were just not catching on to some of the things. And yeah, I've been exposed to welding before, but that's when I really noticed that yeah, some of this isn't just accidental. Some of this is just how my brain's programmed, and it did make me feel a little better because like during school, I was the one not catching on to anything. Even in PE, when they tried to teach us stuff in a classroom, I was just like, what? I don't understand. So we excel in different ways. So keep that in mind. I do want to say this though. It will be difficult to read. It's going to be difficult. Dyslexia is considered a learning disability, not because of nothing. It's a disability. It is something that causes problems. So, even though I'm at a disadvantage, it doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, I've seen double amputees run. They're at a disadvantage to running compared to somebody with both legs, but they still run, you know? So, I'm at a disability because I have dyslexia, but I can still read. You see what I'm saying? It's not an oh no, I'm never gonna be good at this. You have to want to be good at it, and you have to get good at it, because like I've brought up in a different video, my wife flew through The Fault in Our Stars, and I was like on the first 2 chapters by the time she was halfway through it. It's not, I'm never going to get to that reading speed. I kind of accept that, but I'm going to enjoy reading, and I'm going to get better at it. I'm probably faster. I've only been on this book maybe a week or two. I'm already this far in it. When I started this journey and I started trying to learn to read better, halfway through would have taken me a month. It is a slow burn, and there's nothing to it but to do it. To quote another bodybuilder, ain't nothing to it but to do it. You just got to put the work in and get it done. And it sucks, and it has bothered me emotionally. It's messed me up mentally. I've been a little depressed. I mean, The Wizard and Glass was a book that I had trouble getting through. It took me over a year to get through it. The plot was either not interesting, or because it's Stephen King, it was super wordy. He described everything in exceedingly wordy detail, and it just was hard to get through that book. It was an excellent book when it finished. It finished wonderfully, but the journey through that book sucked. I couldn't stay motivated. The words were, it seemed like to me the words were moving around on me again, and I haven't felt that in forever. Because like last time I felt that, I was still in high school, when I felt like the words were jumbling, and that book did it to me bad. And I think it was my lack of interest in the story. Even though the story was wonderful, I do recommend that book. But for me, it was one of those books where it's like, damn, am I gonna get through this ever? I'd be stuck on the same page having to reread it. That's something you're gonna have to do. It sucks, but you're gonna get it. You're gonna get it. I don't care if you have to reread that page 4 or 5 times. I did that. I can think of one part in the book where I was rereading every page at least 3 times, because it was just so hard for my brain to just accept the words coming at it. It was not an easy read, but I got through it, and now look, I'm halfway through Salem's Lot, and I haven't felt that way at all. It has been a wonderful read. Page turner. Since it's October, it's been pretty good. Uh, kind of spoiler alert. There's vampires in it, so it's keeping me interested. Um, there's kind of a love story blooming, but it's not as upfront and center as Wizard and Glass was. So it's not turning me off to it. It's not that I'm against romance, but I read horror because I kind of like the thrill of it. If that makes sense. And there was a good amount of horror in that book, but it didn't really start creeping in until the very end when it all got real intense and the stakes were raised. But that's all I'll say on that. You can get through it. Whatever book you're reading, whether it's I don't know, Steinbeck for school or Mary Shelley Frankenstein, if you don't like that book, all those school books. I think they made you read Lord of the Flies. I didn't read that. Let's just say any book, it's safe to assume that any book that they make you read in high school, I just cliff noted it and got through the class, except for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Steinbeck's The Grape of Wrath. I audiobooked those two. I loved them to death. I've since reread both of those, but seriously, I can recommend Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but if you're dyslexic and you're struggling, Heritage for the Blind has a couple audiobooks on YouTube. It's for people who can't see, but for me, that got me through that English class, so I really appreciate the Heritage for the Blind on those. Because I think they're public domain, so they're all over YouTube, and you just turn it on, and then I read along with the book or with the audiobook, so I'd have the audiobook playing and I'd be tracing it with my finger. That is an excellent way to learn to read. If you're struggling and you can't keep the flow going, have the audiobook playing while you're looking at the page. It does help, and then after a while you can pause the audiobook and just try reading. It'll go a little smoother. It really helped me doing that. What also helped me a lot was say I couldn't get the audiobook, like I'd have to pay money to get the Stephen King audiobooks, and I just paid money for the book. I don't want to pay money for the audiobook on top of that, but if you need to do it, that works great. It works wonderfully. Or I'm sure you can find a maybe not legal copy of the audiobook. It's on you, but having the audiobook playing while you're reading, it's fucking great. Works great. However, if you can't get the audiobook and you have the physical copy, I found that reading out loud and making my mouth do the words that are on the page, like, just an example. On the stroke of midnight, perhaps this town was asleep, except for some reason making my eyes tell my mouth to say it out loud helped shot my comprehension up, and then on top of that made my eyes unscramble the words as I went. So if the words got switched up on the page, what they do for me, and that's why I had to take a second, look at it, read it, and then read it aloud. That will save me from having to reread it multiple times. That's honestly the best thing you can do if you don't have the audiobook, because it's much slower than just listening to the audiobook and reading along. But it works. And then on top of that, I think it further distills like the words. So let's say I have the word dog, D-O-G, on the page. Just the physical word. It distills in my brain. These three letters come into my brain, and that means dog. And I got 4 of them laying over there going to bed. And that whole association for me helped me kind of dog, cat, broomstick. Saying it and reading it aloud allowed it to kind of cement itself in my brain, and the neural passageways were formed, I guess. Again, I don't have the brain chemistry down. It's not something that interests me, but as far as dyslexia goes, you're gonna have to really wear those neural pathways in, kind of like a car would wear grooves into a road, I would imagine. And for me, that works great by just over and over and over and over again like the word specific. Going back to Stephen King, he's my favorite author right now. I'm sorry, but chambray shirts or chambray or however you say it, the blue work shirts that he mentions on like every one of his blue collar characters. Um, the chambray blue shirts. I had to Google what chambray was. I'm like, what are these shirts he's talking about? Because it's always he was in an old beat up chambray shirt or something, and I'm like, okay, I have no idea what that word is. So I looked it up, and apparently, I think it was a brand of work shirts that were like not denim, but a blue cotton, like a heavy cotton, and they were very common. And I think that's where the blue collar term came from for working for the working class. So anyway, I've read it a fuck ton in the Stephen King books because it's kind of a calling card. It seems like he always has a character either in a like specific chambray shirt or he describes a chambray shirt without using the word for it. So I've just over the time I've now associated that. And we were watching an episode of Big Mouth the other day, and I think it was the little crippled hormone monster. He was wearing a chambray shirt and kept saying it, but he said it in a different way. So maybe I've been reading the word wrong, but I finally associated it, and my brain finally like that's what that is, and that moment is amazing. So you just got to put the time into wear those passageways down until you just have that connection, you know. Um, and that's really just the unfortunate truth. There ain't nothing to it but to do it. You just gotta wear it in. I was hoping to start this reading for non-readers series to try to kind of explain, like, okay, I'm dyslexic. This is what I do, and I struggled reading. So maybe if you guys do that, it'll help you, or at least get the ball rolling and be like, you know what? Maybe I do need to start pointing at the words and reading them aloud as I go because that's worked for me. You just gotta ask the question: what do I need to do to get this over with? Wizard and Glass, I had to ask that question a lot, and the question was giving up my breaks at work to reading. So I get a 9 o'clock break for 20 minutes. It's a wonderful break. I start at 5 a.m., go to 9 o'clock. Then I get a 20-minute break, and I read those entire 20 minutes as I sipped on my coffee, and I just read. And then I get a 30-minute break at noon, so we go from 9:20 to noon, and I would sit down, and I would eat my lunch real quick, about first 5-10 minutes. Then 12:10 to 12:30, I would read. And yeah, it's maybe not the most relaxing thing to do on my breaks. I do like getting on my phone on breaks, but I forced myself to just sit down, not even grab my phone, and just start reading. Because I had to do that consistently to get through that book. I was only getting maybe 2-3 pages every break. 2-3, maybe 4 or 5 if I was a good reading day. But like, I'm not a fast reader. I'm probably never going to be as fast as my sister or my wife or my mother, who does read, but I don't know what she reads. I know she reads, but I know the book, what it looks like. I don't know what she reads. I know my wife likes young adult type stuff, Fault in Our Stars, Divergent. She's got a bunch over here. You'd Be Home Now is a new one she bought. I don't know. They look interesting, but I don't think they would be my cup of tea. My sister really likes the young adult stuff. She reads a lot of dystopian future, kind of like Hunger Games, stuff like that. And again, not my cup of tea, but they can fly through a book. I've seen my sister finish a book in a day that's like 400 pages long. And I'm sitting there like, I think I could probably get 30 pages before I get reckless and need to go do something. But you just got to do it. Don't compare yourself to other people. I've mentioned buddy reading in the past, but I don't think that's necessarily the best option if you have dyslexia. Unless you have another dyslexic that's willing to do that with you, because that makes perfect sense. But I don't think you're going to stand a chance reading against somebody who's proficient at reading at the same speed unless you allocate a lot more time than they would. So if I were to buddy read with my wife, I got to spend a couple hours a day where she only has to spend maybe 30 minutes to an hour. That's the kind of thing that if you're that off pace with somebody, buddy reading's not going to work. That's why I find it a little unfair that schools kind of assign it as a chunked out. You need to read this many pages by this day. That was hard for me. But unfortunately, what else are they going to do? They've got 30 students in a classroom trying to figure out, okay, well, this chapter in a week, 85% of the students is going to be able to do it. Unfortunately, they do have to worry about the whole, not the individual. That's why the special ed classes existed, and it makes sense. It does. It sucks because I wanted to be in class with my friends, not all these. I did become friends with the special ed kids, of course, but what I'm saying is that you don't feel quite normal, and there's not a way to really make that happen. It's a fact of life. I'm sorry. No way through it but to do it. You got to get over it. It sucks. High school's not forever. School's not forever. I mean, hell, school's only first 20 years of your life, I think, or first 18 years of your life. That's a blink when you get into the real world. Like, that's barely anything. I got guys at work that are fucking, they're like 30 years into their job. I haven't been alive 30 years. They've been working that same job in the same booth with the same welder. Well, maybe not the same welder, but they have been picking up the same parts, working in the same booth longer than I've been alive. So the 20 years of I'm sorry, I think it's 18. The first 18 years of your life in high school and college, or I don't know what. I'm sorry, I didn't go to college. I'm blue collar. I'm an uneducated little twat. But 24, I think, is when you end college. So the first 24 years of your life is a blink. There's guys retiring with 50 plus years. I saw one dude who refused to retire. I think he'd gone on his 60th year when he finally did retire, when they finally pushed him out the door. He'd been 60 years in at the same job, welding the same parts. Well, no, he was a brake press operator. My bad. Bending the same parts, stepping on the same pedal, standing in the same spot for 60 years. That's 3 times what you're doing at school. So even though school sucks, and it sucks right now, I'm sure you'll get out of it. If you choose to go into the trades, go into the trades. I think it's a very good opportunity for people like us. But if you got that itch and you go to college, you're going to have to work harder. And I'm sorry, but that's how it is. But you can do it because you've got that itch. You're going to get it done. It's just going to suck. I've been thinking about going back to college, and I've kind of made a deal with myself. If I get through this extended read of The Dark Tower without too much trouble, then I can seriously start looking, because that would prove, it's like 25, 30 books, and that would prove to me that I would be willing, or that I would be capable of committing to college after all these years out of school. That would show me I'm capable of it. So that's part of the reason I'm on my journey to the tower, even though it's a long one. It's already been over a year. I think it's been a year and a half now since I started. It's tough. But don't get discouraged. Dyslexia is not a death sentence. It doesn't mean you're going to be uneducated. I feel that I have been gifted with much more important things to me than my proficiency in the academic space. I've been gifted with I've been gifted with a mind that is very mechanically driven. I can think through problems that I've seen people just chalk up to, we gotta go ask somebody. At work, I can think through why they decided to put this gusset here instead of over there where it'd be easier to weld. And that justified its position for me. Whereas other guys would be like, well, they could have put it 6 inches this way and made it 10 times easier. But they didn't see that might cause a stress fracture where they wanted it because of its proximity to another. Anyway, I'm getting off track. what I'm trying to say is I have a very mechanically minded. I can kind of construct things in my head. I can see what they might look like 20 years down the road after they've been beaten to crap and they come back and they're like, this weld failed. And I'm like, okay, I see why. That I've been blessed with a mind that I am happy with. And I think you need to see, if you're struggling with it, you need to look at it and be like, okay, yeah, but I'm fantastic at Call of Duty. I'm not. I suck at video games. I'm terrible. But, like, okay, yeah, but I'm very good at this video game, or I'm very good at computers because I understand why this machine code. Well, nobody codes in machine code anymore. I understand why this Python code works the way it does because if you can wrap your mind around that, good on you, because I'm not that way. But I'm trying to give another example of how your mind might work differently. If you really grasp, I don't know, sewing and can figure out how a couple pieces of fabric construct a sleeve, that would be mind blowing to me because I've attempted and I can't figure out how they make one piece of fabric fold and then lay nicely on your shoulder because, well, this is three pieces of fabric. I can't figure that out. But there are some people, I've met some seamstresses, and I guess they're called seamers. I don't know the male version. They can just, they can make you anything out of fabric. I mean, hell, just your backpack alone is some design. If you can get your head around that, fantastic. I got my head around welding and it worked great for me so far. I mean, it's made a living. I've got a house, I've got 4 dogs, I got a lovely wife. It's worked great. But if you're struggling with dyslexia, just get through it. It sucks. I'm sorry. Cry if you need to. I cried a lot trying to get through school. I cried, I fought, I rebelled, I mean everything you could think of. I struggled hard through high school. And if you're the parent of a kid who's struggling in high school, I mean middle school, elementary school even, I would urge you not to hit them with the "you're not even trying." That was maybe the most damaging sentence of my childhood is "you're just not trying." Or compared, like, if you tried like you did in this, you'd be really good at school. That's not the same. It's not the same because they would always be like, well, if you tried as hard as you did in your welding classes, because I had a trade school or trade program at my school, and I was thankful for that. But they'd be like, well, if you tried as hard as your welding classes as you did your math and English, you'd be a straight A student. That's not how it works. No, I can get my hands on I can touch welding, even though you burn yourself if you do it a little too soon. But I can physically hold this. I can get my brain around this. They start throwing letters and numbers around. My brain can't hold it. My brain can't grasp it the same. So I urge you greatly to just work with their strengths. Try to work on their weaknesses, though. Don't forget about them, but just work with them on their weaknesses. Because it's really easy just to say, oh, you're not trying. And I think as a parent, when you're frustrated, it makes perfect sense why you might say that. I'm not a parent. I'm not a parent. I have dogs. But I can totally understand why that would seem easy to say. And it's not like, oh no, like you're going to ruin your child's life if you said it to him. I mean, tough. I mean, words are words. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not, I don't believe for most children with a learning disability like dyslexia, ADHD, I don't think it's a lack of trying. I think it is, to use the analogy I used earlier, they've been punching a brick wall for so long, and they realize they're not gonna break that brick wall down with their hands. So they just stop trying to break down the brick wall. You know, it's not a matter of not trying, but not seeing results and then getting discouraged from it, I would say. So if there's any, I mean, hell, I told my boss today at work, I'm sick of doing stuff that I can't, how do I put this? I told him at work something along the I don't remember the exact words, but something along the lines of, I'm tired of being at my cutting edge because I do keep failing at certain things, or I don't get something done to what I wanted it to get done. I would like to just fall back to something I know how to do and I can do right, and then go back to expanding my horizons and doing better. It's a complicated thing to explain, but like every now and again, you got to step back and be like, whoa, last year I wouldn't have been able to read. I wouldn't have been able to read this book as fast as I am. That's great. I've made progress. So let's just kind of slow down. Let's go. If I needed to, let's take a week off, but I have to be disciplined that once that week comes to an end, I got to get back on it. Otherwise, I won't go back. I've had that issue reading a couple times where, okay, I'm going to take a week off, and that week turns into 2 months. Kind of kind of a struggle, but I think that happens with everybody. I don't think that's a learning issue. But seriously, if they need to cycle them back, but make sure they come forward, because when they come forward, they'll be refreshed, they won't be frustrated, and they could just hit it and knock that brick wall down and be like, why was that a problem? Stuff like that, just you're gonna find your strengths. Like I said, the stuff that worked for me was reading it aloud while I read it and just listening to myself say the words, hearing an audiobook say the words while I was reading. Those little highlighter cards, this is a really weird thing, but they got like the 2 gray lines and then they got a yellow line, and you kind of move it down and it highlights each line of the page. You can get them on Amazon, like 5 for like $10 or something. Those helped when I was a little kid. As I grew older, those didn't help as much because I couldn't get it down with my eyes on how fast I was reading or how slow I was reading. I tried to move it too soon. But it just highlights one row at a time, so you're not distracted by the words above and below the text you're trying to read. That helped. Let's see, what else? This is getting long-winded, I know, but I had a lot to say on this. I can't remember anything else. Let's see, so reading aloud, audiobook, and reading. I point to the words I read, or more or less anymore, I point to the line I'm on, so that if I get all mixed up, I can go back to where my thumb is, and I'll be like, okay, I was on this line, and then start reading from there. That helped. When I was a little kid, I used those little highlighters. When I was a little older, I just pointed to every word as I read. And then now I'm using my thumb for each line. I figured it's evolved, and you got to just find those steps of find those steps in the evolution of your reading. Other things that have helped in the past where I wear earplugs at work, but like when I'm at home, dogs are out running around, I'll put in some foamy earplugs, and they will help. Coffee shops are great. I've gone to them to read because they're usually chill, quiet. It's kind of nice to have a cup of coffee and a little snack while you're reading. But I get distracted, especially when I was a bachelor. I got distracted by women a lot. Not so much anymore, but yeah, that was a problem because there was too much going on. There were a couple coffee shops that were really slow or had some booths in the back that they were away from everything, and they worked great. The library's good, but again, I kind of had the stimulation problem. Because it's so quiet in there, whenever something happens, you could hear it. So, like, it's real quiet in there, and then you hear doot, doot, and this guy coming through on crutches, and it's like you gotta look at that because it's the only sound in the room, and that didn't help much, but libraries have been good for my reading. However, library books are kind of a struggle because they have a return date, and I'm not a fast reader, and that return date's usually, I think it's about a month at my local library. And that's great and all, but I can't finish a book in a month. So I'll end up rechecking it out, but sometimes they don't let you do that, so it's kind of a problem. But that doesn't mean you can't bring your own book in and read in the library. Some of them got some really comfy chairs now. And then in that case, you go there and then you're like, okay, I'm here to read. Phone away, read. I don't have dogs distracting me. I ain't got the neighbor mowing distracting me. I ain't got the sink in the kitchen that I gotta fix distracting me. Just find your little rituals, you know. Um, I usually sit down. I'll put my phone face down, and I wear a watch. And if I'm not wearing one of my digital watches, I actually got my watches in front of me. I'm not wearing like my G-Shock digital watch. I usually wear a dive watch, so they got a bezel on them, and I can spin the bezel to the minute hand, and then boom, from there, it shows me how long I've been reading. I'm sure you can find a better video explaining dive watches and all sorts of other watches, but it's not an Apple Watch. It's not anything connected to. It's not anything connected to anything. So I don't get distracted, because I get distracted and then bam, my comprehension's toast. I can't remember jack about what I just read. So it's getting a little long-winded, but I'm going to one more time through. Read aloud while you're reading, audiobook while you're reading, point or find some sort of pointer that works. I know some people use them little, like a pin or something. Find a pointer that works if that's your style. And then find some place or find your ritual. If you can read on your lunch break and other breaks, works great for me. I can read at the doctor's office before my appointment. I can read on my lunch breaks, but I know some people can't just read a page or two and then put it away. That's problematic for them. So if you're a longer reader, go to the library. Set aside a chunk of your day to go to the library. Set aside a chunk of your day to sit in your little, like your book room or your book nook. Or I just have all my bookshelves in the living room, so that's where I usually sit. I lay on that couch back there and just read. Find your ritual. And once you've got your ritual, start evolving that ritual a little bit. If you're like, okay, I go to the library every day. All right. Well, my incentive is if I go to the library, I can then go get like a, I don't know, like a drink from McDonald's afterwards, or incentivize it. I'm gonna do a whole episode of this on incentives, but this is getting long-winded. It's been a pleasure to have you. If you made it to this, thank you very much. Now take care, and I'll see you in the next one.